Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Bleeding Edge podcast. I'm your host, Ralph Benker, and with me on the show today, Emil Ogier. Emil, welcome to the Edge. And today we have a special edition from Emil's iPhone. So he's ditched the computer because it can't run Riverside, and the iPhone can. So there you go. Some pretty interesting stories as ever. And I think we're right on the money because yesterday, top news story for me at any rate is Anthropic has shipped Claude Opus 4.7. So this is quite exciting because they have released it at the same price as 4.6, have they? So this is actually quite hilarious because the model is definitely number one on Val's AI's vibe coding benchmark. And you can still process tokens at $5. Well, yeah, kind of like $5 per 25 million tokens. So that's actually quite high in comparison to many of the other models, 70 to 90% higher than most of the Chinese models will cost you. But the hidden tax in Opus is that the new tokenizer can actually use 35% more tokens on the identical prompt. And it's kind of set to this X high, so extremely high effort level. And it's going to consume tokens at basically 35% more than what it was just a few days ago. So they may have launched at the same price, but it's definitely going to get more expensive if you leave it on X high, of course. But it definitely, I mean, and I actually had a really proud moment in the last week. I, for the first time, actually ran out of tokens on my max plan. And basically, that was two people using the same account, pretty much around the clock. Definitely over the weekend, there was a lot going on. And we finally managed to max out and get to 100% of our available processing, and that's great. That was great to see. We had to work really, really hard to try and achieve that. It's going to be much easier now with this 35% more token usage on the identical prompts. So go ahead and see if you can max out your Claude Max account. I tell you, I've tried many times to do it, and the amount of specifications and thousands of lines of code that I've had to write to actually get to the point where it was maxed out is quite staggering. But there you go. Obviously, it's going to be something that happens more often. Then the other big thing that came out was the Anthropic paper on 9 Claude agents actually beating the human alignment researchers. Pretty much is what's Claude's costing you about $22 an hour if you run a number of these instances in parallel. So to do this analysis, I think they ran 4 of these Claude instances in parallel. So it came out at about $22 an hour. And basically, these Claude Opus 4.6 agents recovered 97% of a weak to strong supervision gap in 5 days. And 2 human researchers got 23% of the way through that weak to strong supervision in 7 days. And so the agents obviously, cost a lot less than those 2 human researchers and covered a huge amount. Nearly 5 times or 4 times what the humans were able to achieve. So they even invented 4 new reward hacking strategies that no human had ever predicted. And this is really important because alignment. So this is kind of where the goals of AI are aligned to the goals of humans. It was the one field that everybody said, actually, you can't automate this. And of course, now we have some empirical evidence that you can indeed automate it with this 97% of the supervision gaps covered in 5 days by the AI. So that's pretty impressive. So, hey, researchers, you basically just did yourself out of a job there. But no doubt we'll still need somebody to figure out, what new strategies the AI has actually uncovered. So presumably we'll need somebody to read all of that research and all those papers. The third news item I've got, a pretty interesting story with Sam Altman being firebombed, and there's a guy that's actually been arraigned on that. But obviously what it means is that you're really starting to see people reacting to AI. And so I think there was a recent study from Stanford, was the AI Index, published on the 13th of April. And it shows something like only 10% of Americans are more excited than concerned about AI, versus 56% of experts. Presumably, those Americans they were interviewing are not experts. And so I think 73% of experts versus 23% of the public agree AI will help, which is quite staggering. I think there is a lot to be excited for. So maybe I'm in the expert camp and not in the Joe Public camp. But there you go. This is kind of how people feel. And they are now firebombing Sam Altman's house. So the guy threw a Molotov cocktail. And I think Sam actually posted on social media a picture of him and his family. He's got a young daughter, so him with his partner, kind of going, "Hey, don't take me down now. I've got a family." But let's see if that keeps him safe. So, on some other news, which is kind of interesting, Maine became the first U.S. state to pass a 20 megawatt and data center moratorium. So, basically, they're saying you can't build your enormous data centers here. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, but clearly they're looking after their energy usage and their water. Then another really great news story from this week is OpenAI has actually released their AI jobs transition framework. So basically, they've analyzed exactly which jobs are going to be taken over by AI, which jobs are going to significantly be changed by AI, obviously what's going to disappear. So this is a bit of research that is led by chief economist Ronnie Chatterjee. So he's OpenAI's chief economist, and he published this framework. Interestingly enough, obviously they, they did the research with ChatGPT 5.4, and so ChatGPT was essentially scoring its own homework, trying to figure out just how much of the world it's going to take over. And they actually did, a pretty hefty job looking at 147.9 million jobs, and they found that 18% are at higher automation risk, 24% will reorganize, and 12% grow with AI, and 46% see less immediate change. So we'll have to take a look a little bit later at some of the detail around that. And then my fifth story, which rounds out the news, a really fascinating shift. There is a company that makes footwear. So they do wool sneakers. They're called Allbirds. And they've just sold their shoe business, I think, for about 39 million. And they have put everything into buying GPUs, and they have now built their own data centers and they're reselling compute. Interestingly enough, their shares jumped 600 to 700% in a morning. And so, this is a B Corp that basically, B Corp, they're obviously really looking at sustainable ways of doing business. And they've literally just gone into, one of the most energy consuming industries on the planet. So I hope they've bought a wind farm along with all those GPUs, and just fascinating to see people pivoting. This is not the first one that we've seen pivot in that way, but just interesting that you can go from being a wool sneaker supplier to basically renting out GPUs as a service, and getting a 600% stock pop in the process. That's probably one of the biggest pivots I've seen in a long time. Yeah, it's a bit of wily dealing happening there. So we'll watch that one, see what they make of it. Clearly they think that renting compute is a good business, and I think they're right. So let's see, maybe we'll rent a bit of compute from them and build something great. So, what have you got as your first story? Yeah, that's really the promised land you're describing there. And I have to say, I've actually been playing around with this myself, because one of the things I find is that, in the early days, you really are quite keen to observe and watch and see how it's processing, what it's actually working on. And so I was actually very happy pushing the buttons and just reviewing each step. Obviously now, as we're kind of going deeper into it, and even just trying to be more productive, it's not practical to be engaging with it. And you really want to set up a spec and then let it just run, and not just go away and do the build, but actually do the build, commit, push the code, run the tests, and you can actually use Claude in Chrome, or you can even use the Playwright, CLI Playwright. Actually, is one of these systems from Microsoft that will actually go and browse any website, and it will do everything that a user will do. And so if you are basically running this on local host, what it means is Claude can actually debug itself, and it'll pick up the results of having navigated whatever app, presumably, if it's a web app that you have built, and it will identify the issues and fix itself. And so at the end of that, it also has the ability to basically, if you want, it will even merge the code and push it to production. And the final piece is I'm also getting it to then write release notes and write a communication to the users of the system, as well as build the training material and set out support notes. And so this is really powerful, because what you can start to see is that as long as you've got that initial idea and concept well defined, then it should really be possible to hand that over to Claude, and it'll run, as long as it needs to run to actually build that. And so we have been doing this in a number of different ways over the last 6 months or so. Certainly, Tony, who is one of the developers that I have been working with, is excellent at this. He has a really, really good setup that really can run autonomously. And over the last week, I've actually been building a protocol within Claude Code that mimics a lot of what you just described. So it's actually leveraging some of those native Claude features. And what's fascinating about it is I started with some research to say, okay, I'm going to build something that can orchestrate end-to-end development and, get a small app live uh, with human in the loop in just kind of key places, but not all the way, through like I have been doing it. Actually, one of the review cycles that I run kind of tests ideas. So it tests the logic of what it is you're trying to build. And it came back and it said, look, actually, you're trying to build what Claude already does. So don't worry about doing that. Let's just use the native orchestration and the Git work trees. That all that capability exists already. So don't go away and build that. We'll just build an orchestrator that leverages it. And so that's pretty much where I've got to. I actually ran the first test this morning, and I haven't actually gone back to check the results. But there we go. I'll let you know. There's plenty of things that I've been trying to get to and build over the last while, and most of it I'm doing on the weekends now, because I have work projects and client projects that are taking precedent. So no doubt by our next podcast, I will have either built another 20 apps and have some interesting features live, or I'll be crying that it didn't work. But I think this era of automation is well and truly here. Of course, we saw that co-work was largely developed autonomously by Claude. And that was one of the first, mainstream applications that we've seen wholly built by AI itself. And I think that ran over about 4 weeks. So we know that Boris and his cohorts there at Anthropic have figured this out. Us mere mortals are still trying to play catch up. But it's based on what you just described. There are really advanced and mature features that are now putting that kind of capability in the hands of everybody. So, you want me to go with the story, or you got something else there? The next time I run out of tokens, we'll just go shopping on GitHub. Hopefully, I can find a good API key to use. But I think that's really solid advice. I actually run quite a lot of these scans, and one of the automations that I've included in my automation is, quite an advanced security scan. So I think that's the key thing. And you just have to have that part of your workflow. So here's something quite interesting that I've seen in the recent news, Emil, and that is that Anthropic's CPO, Mike Krieger, actually, he's just resigned from Figma's board, as Anthropic is prepping to build a competing design tool. So I didn't know that they were planning to do this, but, it just goes to show why the SaaS apocalypse is coming, because so much is obviously moving into these LLMs, and the moat is forever shrinking. So Figma obviously is a software design application. It does really great storyboards, wireframes, and you can design entire front ends. It integrates with a number of different code development tools that are using AI. And as Figma's stock slid something like 6% on the first reports earlier in the week. Adobe fell something like 2.7%. Wix, Israeli website platform, they fell 4.7%. So again, you can kind of see that this ripples across the market. That has got a front end design tool is going to feel it. So I think fighting for relevance is going to be the defining term of 2026, because a lot of these companies are really just going to see that AI actually does a much better job. And I think the issue is this. What's kind of interesting on reflection in the last couple of weeks, I've really been looking at, why do we need applications at all? Something like an LLM will just do the job for you. But of course, most people don't necessarily know how to use an LLM in the same way and to actually get the same level of consistency and quality that we have in applications. And this is why applications exist, even though, something that literally just has a chat window in it. Now, if you think about most enterprise applications that people are using, there are probably some hundreds, if not thousands, of pages. All of those pages meticulously put together by a developer, and each of them have got the specific fields that you need in order to do a certain aspect of the job. You know, with AI, you could do the same activity off one chat bar. And so you just kind of lose the need for all of those pages and all of the API calls and all of the integration that's required to actually, make an application run in that way. Obviously, you still need the integration, you still need the data, and that doesn't go away. But the kind of orchestration, the complex orchestration that happens, really just disappears. And we've probably had this conversation 4 or 5 times, but yeah, I just reflect on it. And I think where I've got to is that actually applications probably won't disappear overnight, because of the fact that people just want simplicity. They don't want to figure out how an AI can necessarily do the job, even though it can. And so I think the market reacting, on with Figma kind of dropping 6% on the first release of this news, fair enough. I'm pretty sure Figma and companies like that, if they innovate now, there's no doubt that that they'll be still keep their market. They've got a really big user base. They just have to find the value, and I think that's really the trick now for SaaS, because this kind of services as a software is definitely the way to go. And maybe it is, development as a service, even this DOS. Essentially, we're just building for your very unique personalized requirements. And even if it's a big company like Figma, why not? Why not build custom and personalized capability, for the clients? So, anyways, that's my big story. Yeah, yeah, I like that. So you heard it here first. Services as a service, and Emil Ogier, ladies and gentlemen, is your pioneer. So, there we go. Your moment of fame, Emil. We'll have to get that on LinkedIn immediately. I think, a bit of stress in the system is actually always good. And just like in humans, we sit up and listen when there's a bit of stress in the system. And it's one of the things that actually helps us commit to long-term memory, because we take a deeper, awareness of what's going on around us. And I think the same is actually true for the LLMs. And there's been a number of these types of tricks over that I picked up over the last 2 years or so. And one in particular is, if you actually, include in your prompts, stop and take a breath. And again, it just kind of puts it into a somewhat deeper thinking mode, which is kind of interesting. But I really love this idea of putting that into the MD file for Claude to read, just as it's about to set off. There it is, your enemy, number one, your arch nemesis, Codex, and is going to be reviewing your work. So be on your best behavior. And obviously, we've seen that when the AI knows it's being reviewed, it actually behaves differently. This has been proven a number of times, especially when they're doing the evals. So I'm going to add this one in. I'll let you know if I actually uncover any differences there. But yeah, that's a great top tips. And just remind us, so which file are you actually putting that in? And that's like in the Claude MD file. So it reads it, on startup. Yeah, yeah, amazing. Really, really good stuff, and quite simple as well. So that's definitely one to take away. And even if it's not true, of course, I think people do find quite a little bit of an issue when they're actually physically reviewing code between multiple models. I've seen some people have a bit of success with it. Certainly, I've tried it in the past, but I have to say now with some of the custom skills that I'm using, I rarely tend to move between models over the last 2 weeks, especially. And I shared this in a previous podcast. I've pretty much now moved all of my AI activity to Claude Code. I pretty much use that 90% of the time. Sometimes I'll go onto Claude Desktop, but pretty much everything that I'm running is within Claude Code. And I very rarely need to go to another model. So over the last weeks, it's taken over from GenSpark. So GenSpark, a very, very capable AI tool that actually basically gives you access to multiple LLMs, and it picks the right one for the job. It's got lots and lots of features with image generation and video generation. It's got its own version of OpenClaw. It's also got a really, really capable presentation builder. All of that, as capable as GenSpark is really surpassed now by what I can get out of Claude Code. And so I've certainly been able to sweat that Claude Code way more. And it's just, yeah, there's been no need actually to engage in any other applications. And more importantly, I've been able to do some pretty advanced research using applications built by Claude Code. And just recently, I put together a news gathering and research agent for a retail client. And honestly, the amount of work that this app does to go and do product level research is quite staggering. So, yeah, there's been, nothing else that comes close to it. And of course, the latest version of Claude Code, Claude now has something called routines. Routines are supposed to replace N8N and Zapier. And even before routines, I have had very little need to actually run any automation through N8N. I'm actually now converting most of the N8N workflows into kind of code and Python scripts that are orchestrated via cron jobs, and you can kind of schedule them to run. But now Claude Code routines will make that even easier. I haven't used it yet, and I know you were saying that the latest feature, which I think you were alluding to, this Claude Code routines, is riddled with bugs. So it's just been released, and essentially it gives you a no code, low code automation platform. And basically, there's no need now for things like N8N and Zapier. But we've heard that before, and clearly we might have to wait a little while for this routines functionality to become a bit more mature and less buggy, which is unfortunately the case when you vibe code everything. Yeah, that's a good one. I actually did try to access routines in Claude Code just with an automation that I was setting up for this product and for this new news research. Yeah, it didn't quite work the way that I wanted to, so I ended up with a cron job. But I will give it another another go and see if we can get that to work. But I mean, it just goes to show these tools are really consolidating at a rate, and they're eating entire segments of the software industry. And so, I don't know what it takes to have a strong moat these days. I think unless you have some kind of specific hardware, or you just have a critical mass of optimized features in a particular vertical, an industry focus that the LLMs just can't quite trump, with their more generic feature set. I think it's very, very difficult to see how a lot of these tools are actually going to survive. In fact, Canva, which is a tool a lot of people use, it's a design platform. They've just launched AI 2.0. They are basically testing a valuation at 42 billion for their IPO, which again, that's just quite staggering, really. And so what you can do with their latest AI is actually describe your project in plain English, and you can get editable, iterable design with persistent memory. And so that persistent memory obviously has been largely missing from the AI experience, certainly over multiple sessions. Certainly Claude has got a memory file, which definitely improves it. Obviously, you can use ChatGPT projects and this type of thing to get around that. But I think a lot of people will find that Canva AI probably will be quite helpful. I used Canva quite a lot, probably about a year ago. I actually found it just uh, bloated with features, complicated, difficult to use at times. And so I ended up not using it, especially around the time when Nano Banana came out. And so, but Canva is loved by a lot of people, certainly amateur designers, or at least, solopreneurs definitely have relied on it. But it will be interesting to see, where they go with their AI 2.0 launch. Do you use Canva, Emil? This is it. It's like a real consolidation. And as I say, I think, the moat is maybe just a dream now, a distant dream for so many software companies. So I really expect the market to change quite significantly. And, interestingly enough, I think if you have got a piece of hardware, that probably is, the biggest moat that you can have as a technology company now. And so that's definitely the way to go. But just one interesting story that I came across in the last week or so. I think last week we spoke about Anthropic's Mythos. Mythos is, of course, their tool that is able to do the cybersecurity analysis. And it's so powerful that it keeps finding vulnerabilities in almost every bit of code and in code that we're using every day. The White House is preparing to give federal agencies access to Anthropic's Mythos. Why is this a funny story? Well, of course, they actually deemed Anthropic as public enemy number one when Anthropic basically wouldn't allow them to use all of the features of Claude on their military hardware. And obviously, here you go. Once again, Anthropic at the absolute cutting edge, and the White House having to go and say, hey, guys, can we talk? So maybe not all has been lost. There was obviously a 200 million deal that OpenAI basically won as a result of Anthropic not signing away the full rights to use their tool in defense. So, with Mythos, it just goes to show how powerful this tool actually is, because Trump's regime definitely said they were never talking to these guys again. So we'll have to see how that one plays out. And I don't know, the White House with that kind of power, that's quite a scary thing, given all the weird things that they seem to be doing these days. But there you go. Yeah, talking about providing services to agents. I don't know if you know this company, Andon Labs. Very interesting AI first company that has actually been looking at business models where you can run autonomous businesses with AI. Famously, they have been running the vending machine test. So probably about 2 months ago, they ran the second vending machine test, which Claude actually won. And this is where they give each of the different AIs a vending machine, and they give them a budget, and they ask them to make as much money as possible selling Kit Kats and bottles of water out of the vending machine. And the first test was a bit disastrous. This was back in, I think, late 2024, and in 2025, the back end of 2025, they ran it again. got an entirely different experience because the models had improved somewhat. And now they've gone and actually leased a San Francisco based store, and they've handed it to an AI named Luna. And basically, Luna, the first job that Luna did was it went and hired 2 human employees over the phone. And I'm not entirely sure exactly what those human employees are going to do. Probably stock the vending machine. And, it's got a 3-year lease, and it's basically going to be trying to run a store. So there you go. Andon Labs, really fascinating business. Definitely want to check out. You can have a look at, what they're doing at andonlabs.com. In fact, out of all of the evals, this is kind of like the benchmarks for which AIs are doing the best. I love the vending machine the most, and that's the one that I really look at because there are so many factors at play when you hand over a budget and a profit target to an AI. And obviously, Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, those were the top performing. Um, and I think they did about 20 or 25 different AIs. Most of them made at least a small profit, but there were about 25% that actually lost money. And as I say, I think this is where the rubber hits the road. That's the real proof that we want to see. So I'll be watching that one very carefully. And maybe even on the next show or something, we'll do a bit of a deep dive on exactly what that and on market launch is all about, and which AIs they're actually going to be putting through the mill. So there you go, AI as your retailer. Definitely a positive signal. And, I think this is why the recent research by OpenAI's chief, what is he, economic research guy, basically, if you look at what they came up with, is higher automation risk jobs, including, bookkeeping clerks, data entry keyers, customer service reps, sales reps, some administrative roles. And higher automation risk. I mean, I would say it should be possible more or less to entirely automate those features. But no doubt, if you are a bookkeeper with, particular knowledge about tax codes, then there may still be a much kind of higher order service that you can actually provide. I mean, data entry keys, probably not. But as a data entry clerk, you may well become somewhat of an automation specialist and actually look at how you can automate the entry of data. And that's not really that hard or that technical. And so I do think that even folks that are at that kind of coal face of admin have the opportunity to still use their skills, which is what you were saying earlier. In terms of jobs that will be reorganized, they're talking about lawyers, software developers, and obviously, we're kind of moving from, in terms of software development, very much moving from the actual coding to really thinking and describing in systems. And that's not such an easy thing to do. If you ever kind of sit down in front of a computer with a blank page in front of you and say, all right, you're going to build an app, good luck. I think the art of really thinking in systems is something that is not available to everybody, but certainly software developers do think in that way. And so I think they're well placed to take on a much kind of higher order level of thinking and output. And so definitely a big reorganization there. Growth with AI. So these roles include software developers, graphic designers, and there's just a high kind of, demand elasticity. I think when output gets cheaper, people, actually end up asking for more of it. So if I just kind of think about music, for example, the fact that you can make unbelievable music with something like, Suno Music, and it just, on Apple Music, I think there is a completely made up artist with something like 11 songs that are in the charts. I think this particular artist, AI artist, is now number 3 on Apple on the Apple Music list there. And I just, I just think that doesn't necessarily mean that artists won't have a future. I just see the fact that you can actually create music for all kinds of experiences. And, a restaurant can actually launch its own album. A mechanic shop can create its own music that it plays for its customers while they're waiting for their oil to be changed. Now, do you want to do these things? Maybe, maybe not. Do they become, just another dimension for people to experience your brand? Absolutely. Is it now possible for, every business to actually have its own soundtrack to their business? Yes. And I think this is kind of the case in point. It just drives an increase in demand. But of course, you still need people that know how to make good music, how to write good lyrics. AI can do a lot, but it can't select, it can't curate for that as well as we can. And so I think it's just changing the nature of how we work, this kind of higher order thinking. And we see it everywhere. So less immediate change. The jobs included teachers, nurses, plumbers, firefighters. So don't worry, Sam Altman, you'll still get a firefighter to come and put out that Molotov cocktail. And home health aides. So obviously really key there, people that are, that have palliative care needs. AI can help, but it's not going to take that physical aspect of the job. Childcare workers, janitors, and I think obviously housekeeping and cleaners. So no doubt a need there, for people that interact with the physical world. And so I think there's one interesting one that worth noting. Court reporters have a very high AI exposure score, ranking in the top 5 in some measures. But in some jurisdictions, a human is still legally required to certify each transcript and record. And so, as I was saying earlier, we're just going to be spending a lot more time reviewing what the AI has actually captured or done some analysis on. So there you go. So it's not all doom and gloom. I think it's going to be a long road yet. The future is definitely unevenly distributed, and so it's going to take time for this potential of AI to really make its way into all jobs. But it's definitely coming. I'm very excited by it because I do think it makes work so much more interesting for us. Well, I can't agree with you more. At the end of the day, I have written an album for an alpaca farm. And so it's actually a fantastic album. I listen to it regularly. It's on SoundCloud. We've got a few more songs to release yet. But of course, each of the animals they're actually, it's a farm, a herd of 20 alpacas, and each one is named after a different music artist. And so we've taken that musical inspiration to write a custom song for each alpaca. And, the farm is very well loved here in Ibiza. And actually, there are some 20 odd people that have adopted an alpaca. And so, it's hyper personalized. It's not meant for 1 million people. It's going to be playing to an audience of, I don't know, maybe 100 people. But, those 100 people are really invested in those alpacas and they love the songs. And so this is what I think is so exciting for us. And if you are a songwriter and you are a producer, I think you just learn to express yourselves in a different way. Ultimately, AI just becomes an instrument, but the creative process doesn't necessarily change. You still, are really driving it and directing it. And that's kind of what's exciting. Of course, your mum can do the same thing. So you just have to get really good at it really, really fast. And so I think that is probably the end of our show. I was trying again to improve my AI joke writing skills in the humor segment. I absolutely did laugh out loud today in the first joke that it tried to write. And it said Anthropic shipped Opus 4.7 at the same price as 4.6. And it went on to say, in the same way, a used car dealer is technically a financial advisor. While that in itself wasn't that funny, what was obviously funny was the way that Anthropic had styled the fact that it's the same price, even though it's actually using your tokens 35% faster on its extremely high thinking mode. Anyway, so on that note, that's a wrap for the show. Emil, thank you very much. Yes, we will have to do a big Ibiza launch. Actually, we've invented a new sound. It's called Ibiza Reggae Lounge. So not all of them have this kind of reggae influence, but there you go. I Googled it. In fact, I didn't Google it. I went on ChatGPT and asked it if Ibiza Reggae Lounge exists. And it said no, it couldn't find any reference. So there's another first on the show for you. Invented a new fusion sound called Ibiza Reggae Lounge. So you can check it out on SoundCloud if you go in and do a search for Ralph Benker. you will probably find an album called Alpacas in Ibiza, and take a listen. I think there's about 5 songs on there, and there's another 20 to come. So on that musical note, we'll see you on the edge.